As we hear our scripture reading this morning, we may be wondering, why isn't it the Palm Sunday story? What happened to Jesus on the donkey today? This year for Lent, we've been traveling the journey towards Easter through parables. And so we celebrate Palm Sunday like we do every year, and we know the familiar story that we celebrate in our liturgy of Jesus coming into town for Passover, riding on the donkey, and the crowds cheering and waving palms and laying clothes down. And we are thankful today that we have palms to wave. We are thankful for all the clothing that has been donated. But on our journey, we need to stop and reflect. And so we continue through our journey in parable. This morning, this week, we get the parable of the Great Banquet, which might also be called the parable of the bad excuses. Not all excuses, you see, are created equal. Some are actually legitimate excuses. In your mind, you probably know what is a good excuse and what's a bad one. You've probably got your bad excuse that you've kind of worked out for things that you pull when you need it. You know which excuses work with which family members. We figured out which excuses work with which teachers over the years or which employers. But we all know there's good excuses and then there's just bad excuses. Somewhere in the middle, there's a gray area. There's the ethical conundrum, the dilemma. It's not a bad excuse, but it's not really a reason either. Let me clarify these. I have to wash my hair. That's just a bad excuse, right? I can't go out tonight, I have to wash my hair. I can't make it to your party, I have to wash my hair. It's a bad excuse. I'd like to help, but my family's visiting. Ooh, this is a tough one. Because you've got family there to host, but you might have something you committed to. Did you know the family were coming? Was it a surprise? You don't really know. It's a nice, vague excuse, right? It's more of an ethical conundrum than a real bad excuse. And then there's just really legitimate excuses. I'm sorry I broke my leg. I can't race today. That's a good excuse. Unless it's like a reading race, and then it doesn't work. But we know there's good excuses and bad excuses. In today's story, we get three very different excuses. One of them says, I just got married. That seems like a pretty good excuse. It seems like a legitimate thing. I'd like to come, but I just got some new oxen. They're out in the field, and I need to make sure they're all situated. I need to make sure everything's taken care of. Well, that seems like a dilemma. If you're counting on those oxen, if you're counting on this livestock to tend your farm, to help support your family, there's some responsibility that comes with owning a bunch of oxen. Not something I've personally dealt with, but I assume it has responsibility with it. It's not exactly a bad excuse, more of a dilemma, a conundrum. Then we get the third one. I've got some property to go check out. Yeah, the property's not really going to go anywhere, right? It's not going to disappear. It's not going to spoil. It doesn't have to be fed. And we all have to eat. And the invitation is to a banquet. There's going to be food. This just seems like a really bad excuse. Interestingly enough, all three excuses have the same outcome. No food for them. No taste of the banquet, as it is worded. And the third guy's thinking, I should have just said I had to wash my hair. Why did I work that hard on a good excuse? No food for any of them. And who fills their place? Who takes their space at the banquet table? The poor, the lame, the blind, those in need. It seems like they didn't refuse the invitation. They didn't seem to have better things to do or other things to do. Now, they could have been mistrusting. They could have been self-righteous about it. They could have been stubborn and said, oh, now you want to invite me to your party. Now when you've got no one to eat with, you want me to come in. But they didn't. They received the invitation and came in and took their seats at the table. Now, I want to invite you to do a little party planning math with me. How many invitations originally went out in the story? Easy answer. Ready? 3. Right, good job. Everybody got 5 points for everybody. Good job. 3 guests invited. None of them come, right? So how many spaces are there available at the table? 3 spaces, right? And we invite in the cripple, the blind, the poor, and the lame. Even if we assume there's only 1 cripple, 1 poor, 1 blind, and 1 lame, how many are we at? We're at 4 people. But those seem to be terms of generality, not specific, so we assume they're more than 1, because I'm guessing there was more than 1 poor person in town. Just saying. So if it's a group of people, what would have fed 3 was enough to feed a whole bunch. What does that say about the expectation of the people this host invited? What does it say about their privilege, their status, of what it would take to entertain them versus what people really need? What if they were prepared for a bigger crowd all along? What if the host knew the crippled, the lame, the poor? What if the host knew they were going to come in? They just didn't need an advanced invitation. What if the host knew that there were some people who would come when invited, and others might need a little planning? What if the host thought to themselves, these friends of mine, these people in the community, they're busy and they tend to make up excuses. I need to give them advance warning. There's some people in our community who like to make excuses. I need to make sure they have no good excuse. I'll send them an invitation in advance. I'll even send my servant out to remind them. And what happens? They still make excuses. What if the host knew all along that those in need would be invited? To them, those in need, the crippled, the blind, the lame, the invitation, it's heard as good news. Food for the soul, medicine for a wounded spirit, shelter from the struggles of a hard life. Those in privilege, the invitation sounded like an inconvenience. Another activity on the calendar, an obligation that maybe they had forgotten, an opportunity they took for granted. An opportunity they took for granted. The Christian story does not translate well to privilege. The Christian story does not translate well to privilege. Think about it historically. Through the centuries, the church has grown in times of struggle. The church has grown in adversity. It's when people were persecuted in Rome that the population of the church exploded. It has been consistent throughout history that in times of struggle, in cultures of condemnation, that faith has grown. Conversely, through the centuries, we know the church has struggled to deal with power. We know the church has struggled to deal with comfort. There's a great line from the last Batman movie that Christopher Nolan did, with Bane as the bad guy facing off against Batman, and he says, "Success has defeated you, Batman." It's a fairly true statement for the church. So often when we find ourselves in times of comfort, of ease, times of abundance, we have a harder time understanding a gospel that speaks so clearly to those who are poor, to those who are hurting, those who are in need, those who feel oppressed. So often we struggle to be faithful as people of privilege. Those who face addiction hold on to their faith like their life depends on it. And maybe it does. Those who are incarcerated sometimes find faith as a lifeline. And maybe it truly is. Those who can choose which church to attend, find one that suits their tastes, pick where they would like to get involved, ask what programs are provided for their families, see if they like the music that's offered, see if they get along with the folks. Those of us, well, faith's not a matter of life or death. It's not a matter of life or death. The Christian story does not always speak well to comfort, to privilege. And maybe we see that in Jesus' story today. How often have we felt like our faith journey was an inconvenience? How often has it become just another activity on the calendar, an obligation we've forgotten, an opportunity we take for granted? I don't know about you, but when I read this parable, I like to imagine myself. We can always see ourselves in different characters in the story. I like to see myself as one of the extras. I'm not poor. I'm not disabled. But I know I wouldn't refuse an invitation from God, right? So I like to think of myself as one of the extras. Even after the poor and the lame were brought in, there's more room, right? There's still more room. And so the servant goes out to bring others in to fill the space, to fill in the party. And I like to think of myself as one of those extras. It's a safe place to be in the story. If I'm honest, if I see myself as the host, then I'm let down by those closest to me. And while I might be generous, there's the burden of providing hospitality to everyone. And now not just hospitality to my friends, but hospitality to all those the servant has wrangled and brought in. And it's a burden I don't know if I want. I'd rather be one of the extras. If I'm the servant in this story, then I'm scared of the host. This host seems to have a temper, or at least some strange expectations. I'm not sure I want everything riding on me to get the people here. I'm not sure I want to be disappointing the host if things don't go well. It's a lot of pressure. I'd rather just be one of the extras. And if I'm the poor or the crippled, okay, but I know I'm not. Even when I'm not feeling well, even when I've had the flu, even if I'm short on cash, even if we've had a lot of bills come in, even when we've been really tight on money and been looking for some extra work on the side to pay off some debt, even when we're doing that, we're not who they're describing in the story. We're not those who are in the street with nowhere to eat. We're not those in the street with nowhere to go. We're not those begging on the side of the road for someone with a sign that says, "Blind, please help me. Crippled, I can't go to my home. I'm poor. I have nowhere to go." I'm not one of them. So I'm left with the three that didn't show. I'm left with the three that made excuses. And I'd just rather be one of the extras. I would so much rather just be one of the extras. We just show up. We just eat. We just get to come to the banquet and enjoy it all. Just one of the crowd, going with the flow. And if I can be one of those extras, then I don't have to face my own excuses. I don't have to face my own excuses. Sadly, though, I think it's the three where I see myself most reflected. I think it's the plot of the three that grabs my attention and makes my gut churn, which is the sign in any parable that it's where I need to pay attention. How about you? How often has your faith felt like an inconvenience? How often has your faith felt like another activity on the calendar, an obligation we may have forgotten or kept on the side burner, an opportunity we take for granted? Next week is Easter. The invitations have been sent out. It is on the calendar. Walmart has a section for it. Everybody knows it's coming. It's Easter. Even Buddhist dentists have little Easter bunnies and eggs on their office wall. Everybody knows it's coming, right? So how will we receive the invitation? Will we be inconvenienced by how much there is to fit into one day? Will we be worried about making it to all of our obligations on this special celebration? Will we be wrapped up in the tasks of setting up, cleaning up, doing the chores along the way? Or will we come with an enthusiasm for the love and grace we know in Christ? Will we come with thanksgiving for the perpetual second chance given by God? Will we come ready to celebrate the new thing that God is always about to do in us? The invitation has been shared. The story has been told. We come next week knowing what will be served at the banquet. We come next week knowing the end of the story already. We know the resurrection story is before us. That's why we do all this preparation. It's not like we're curious how it's going to end. It's not like getting ready for Christmas and Easter. We go through the preparation not knowing the end of the story. We've heard it before. We know what is offered at the banquet. It is unconditional love. It is a grace freely given. It is the opportunity to start over every day as a new beginning. We know what is on the table for the great banquet. Will we be hungry for it? Or will our excuses get in the way? Amen.